From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And ahead today, K-State's Bill Schapaugh will draw from the newly compiled results of K-State's 2017 Soybean Variety Performance Test. Among other things, he'll explain how this year's test took a different approach to comparing varieties, and Bill comments on how dicamba drift influenced the test yield numbers. Then K-State's Robin Reed will talk about a series of workshops coming up early in 2018 at which farm families looking for advice on managing their way through the current economic challenges can work directly and privately with the Farm Analyst program out of K-State. And later, with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas, K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven, right here on Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Soybean growers, it's your turn now to hear what came about from the 2017 Soybean Variety Performance Trials conducted by Kansas State University. The results are all now in and shedding some light on soybean performance that can be helpful to you as you go about your next round of seed selection. Once again, by our way is K-State soybean breeder Bill Schapaugh. Of course, variety selection is so pivotal to soybean production success, so the information that you generate by these tests is quite helpful in that respect, Bill.
Well, I hope so. There's just a tremendous amount of investment going on, both in the private sector and public sector, in developing new varieties, new germplasm, new things coming on the market every year. The big increase in entries this year was the Roundup Ready Extend varieties. We're trying to get information out on the performance of those so farmers can make informed decisions.
Tell us then about the scope of the trials this year, the locations, how many varieties, what was the story?
Well, the scope was about like last year. We had 15 different tests. They're scattered. Most of them are in the eastern two-thirds of the state, but we've got sites that go all the way out. We had a site out at Colby in northwest Kansas this year, an excellent location, excellent test. We had about the same number of entries they had the last couple of years, about 130 different entries from 14 different companies or programs, and I'm talking some of the public programs. The State Experiment Station entered varieties in the test for us to evaluate this year. So about the same number of total entries, but a change in the genetic makeup of those. We had a big increase in the Roundup Ready Extend varieties. They were almost half the number of entries in the total test were Roundup Ready Extend. The Roundup Ready to Yield varieties, the number of those entries dropped off dramatically. We saw a big increase in the Liberty Link varieties. We had 20 Liberty Link varieties, and we had about 30 conventional varieties this year and a few Roundup Ready 1 varieties. So a good mix with a big increase coming in the Roundup Ready Extend varieties. You note that there was an appreciable change in the test procedure here in 2017. What's that about, Bill? Well, we're getting all the new genetics coming along. The Roundup Ready Extend is here now. Presumably there'll be more different kind of traits coming on. And so we made the decision here to modify our test procedures this year so that all the varieties, and this includes conventional varieties, Roundup Ready 1 varieties, Liberty Link varieties, Roundup Ready to Yield varieties, the Roundup Ready Extend varieties, all those, regardless of the herbicide resistance traits, they have all been placed in the same test rather than having separate tests like we've had the last 20 years or so. So everything from the conventional to the various new herbicide-resistant traits are all evaluated in the same test with the same management practices. Well, a quick synopsis of the growing conditions under which the soybean variety performance tests were conducted around Kansas this past year. And if one looks broadly at soybean production in the state, it was a good year. Was that mirrored in the K-State trials? Pretty close. If you looked at our yields of our test, of these 15 tests, compare 2017 with 2016, The results are either pretty similar or in many cases we had actually a little bit higher yield. We were fortunate in many of our spots. We had timely rains by and large and had some very good yields. So good conditions overall. We had some hail, and we had some extreme hail at both the tests at Ottawa. They were destroyed. I think it was about the end of May. We went back, and the crew there and Eric A.D., they replanted that about June 9th, June 10th somewhere. So we had about a 9 or 10 day delay there to get that reestablished. But that test turned out to be great and very good production, very good precision at that test, both in the early and the late test that was handled there. So that went very well. The driest spot for us for the entire state was Ossaria, south of Salina. Great growing conditions early, good growth and development. But in June, it just decided to quit raining, and July and August were extremely dry. We ended up with yields in the 30 bushel range, average yields for that site. But all the rest of the dryland sites were well into the 40s and 50s. The average yield of the dryland sites for this year was 56 bushels. That's pretty similar to last year. The irrigated sites, we had 3 irrigated tests. Their average yields were in the 70 bushels. The highest yielding location of all the tests was dryland over by Cairo, by Topeka. Had a mean yield of 82 bushels, and some of the entries were tapping into the 90 bushel range. So
dryland to stress.
That was dryland. Right. That was dryland. The dryland test at Cairo out-yielded the irrigated test over closer to Rossville. So good range of performance, good level of precision for this year to help characterize these varieties.
Now, Bill, you've made observations in this test report on an issue out there concerning a particular herbicide application. Producers are well acquainted with the circumstances concerning dicamba. Was this at all a factor in the evaluation of your varieties?
Well, perhaps. I can't give you a definitive answer, yes or no, on this. Unfortunately, we did have 4 of the 15 tests that did experience some dicamba drift. Those 4 included Ossaria, a low-yielding environment. Both of the north-central sites at near Scandia and near Belleville, they experienced dicamba drift. And then the site south of Onega was the 4th site. So those 4 sites had some drift. The drift occurred during vegetative growth or early reproductive growth when the plants were starting to flower, but it was early, very early in the season to moderately early in the season. We got the typical leaf symptoms at all 4 of these sites. We had the cupping that were evident, but we didn't see any plants die. We didn't see growing points die on the plants. So they just it looked like they were held back for a couple, 3 weeks. At the 3 sites, Scandia, Belleville, and Onega, they had relatively good to very good growing conditions after the drift occurred. I know at Onega, those plants probably increased vegetative dry matter plant height 4 or 5 times from when they were initially sprayed, maybe more than that. Tremendous growth and development, good growing conditions. So we really weren't clear, but it looked like for the most part they grew out of it. Except for at Ossaria, they remained, the symptoms, the leaf cupping remained really evident through pod development because they just didn't put on that much more vegetative development. But then we have to come in and harvest these plots and see what happened. The best I can do here is to look at the relative performance of the Extend beans versus the non-Extend beans or the non-dicamba resistant beans in situations where they did get drift and where they don't. And from the performance data that I see here, I don't see a trend where the performance of the Roundup Ready Extend varieties are dramatically better than the non-dicamba resistant varieties at the sites that did receive the drift versus the locations that did not experience the drift. For example, if you look at both the Scandia and the Belleville sites, you'll see in the top yielding group, there'll be Roundup Ready Extend varieties in that top yielding group. There'll be Liberty Link or conventional beans in that top yielding group. Okay, no, doesn't seem to be any particular advantage to that. Same thing that occurred at Ossaria. A little bit different situation occurs in Onega. If you look at the results in that test, there's only 2 varieties in the high yield group, and they're both Roundup Ready Extend varieties. None of the conventional or Liberty Link varieties or the Roundup Ready Yield varieties are in that top yielding group. close, not statistically significantly different from some of the lower yielding varieties in the top yield group, but they're not in the top yield group. But if you look at some of the other sites, that also occurred. If you go down to Columbus, in the Group 3 and early Group 4 test at Columbus, and look at the performance there, the top yielding group, they're all Roundup Ready Extend varieties. There's several of them. And that location did not experience any drift. And so we've got that where it just isn't nice and clean. This is certainly not a desirable situation. We don't like to see it happen. I hope it doesn't happen next year. But we'll take this, this experience we gained this year, and next year we'll take a little bit more of a note of perhaps where we might be able to place our locations, might be able to move it on experiment fields or on farmer cooperator fields to help reduce the chance of this happening again.
As folks can tell, a wealth of information available through the Soybean Variety Performance Test report. And you would, as you do every year, Bill, urge producers utilize what you've brought together here in the K-State program in the way of information as part of their overall research into what to plant in 2018, correct?
Absolutely. A lot of information out there, and there's tests at the county level. Private companies put out tests. Farmers have information, but the technology you have available can characterize variety differences as well. So this is one component to help with the selection process.
And it's available to you one way for certain now, the other soon. One, you can go online to agronomy.ksu.edu/extension for the electronic copy of the results, the link there. The printed version to be out via the High Plains Journal very soon now, and likewise distributed through local extension offices around the state. It's been an intriguing year, though, Bill, in summary, as you look back on the past year.
Certainly. Everyone's different.
Thank you for summarizing it for us, and we always appreciate the hard work that goes into this on the part of you and your team. He's Bill Schapaugh, soybean breeder at Kansas State University, with some of the important notes from the 2017 K-State Soybean Variety Performance Tests throughout the state of Kansas. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. We want to bring to your attention unique opportunities for farm families who are in need of some level of assistance in planning for the future to capitalize on the services provided by the Farm Analyst Program. Out of the Agricultural Economics Department here at K-State, there will be a series of farm financial workshops taking place. And to remind us once again of what's being provided here is Robin Reed, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. Robin, this developed to address what we suspect are some really stressful issues out there for our farm families this winter, right?
Right. So we know, Eric, this is really the 4th year, going into 2018 that we're seeing a downturn in the farm economy. The low commodity prices really putting a bite on farmers out there. And we wanted to expand the services that we've had available since the 1980s to service more families across the state and to help them plan for the upcoming year and make sure that they have the net farm income and the cash flow to provide for their family, to pay any debt payments that are due, and really to be more profitable in this coming year.
Mm-hmm. So the Farm Analyst Program is being basically taken to the country, if you will, at 5 locations starting in early January, extending into February, correct?
So yes, if you're not familiar with our Farm Analyst Program, this was started back in the 1980s, and it's a service that provides an analyst to come out to your farm. Typically the first visit is an all-day, 8 to 12-hour visit at the farm, where that analyst will help you put together your farm records into a balance sheet, enterprise budgets, and a base business plan for your operation. and then look at some alternatives that could increase net farm income, profitability, and cash flow. So we have 5 of these analysts around the state that is their sole job with us at K-State, is to be analysts that go out to the farm. Now, in these workshops, what we wanted to do is provide that service scaled down a little bit and at a reduced cost. So these are 4-hour-long appointments. We call them workshops, but really what it is a 4-hour one-on-one consultation with a farm analyst. We do the same service there as far as putting together a balance sheet, enterprise budgets, and a base business plan, and look at some alternatives, but we ask for the financial information ahead of time that we can have it in our software that we use called FinPack, and we can prepare for the appointment and reduce the amount of time that we need to do this analysis.
Do want to re-emphasize that this is an appointment-oriented program. It is not a group effort, if you will. It's very much one-on-one and important to folks out there in full confidentiality, correct?
Absolutely. And we make sure that we stress that to all the families that are calling in and all the promotional materials that we have out there. When you turn in your financial information, we'll provide a sealed envelope for you, and only the farm analyst assigned to your case will view that financial information. So we are very professional about trying to provide unbiased financial statements for you to help plan for the future, but we're doing that very, very much confidentiality.
And you say, Robin, this question came up, who will be doing the consultations? And you said right there the farm analyst professionals who are into this full-time, but as well other extension professionals who have been trained in this area will be handling that duty as well.
Yes, so I have gotten that question, is who's actually going to be the farm analyst on my case. When I get a call into my office or when we take registrations here at some of our events coming up, one of the things I ask is, where the farm is from, and we will assign a farm analyst not from that area. Unless specifically requested, we want to make sure that you're working with a farm analyst that isn't going to be seen, at the church or the grocery store or something like that. We want to make sure you have somebody very capable but somewhat disconnected to the community that you're from, unless you do want your local person. Now, as I mentioned, we have 5 farm analysts around the state. We already 3 years ago saw that the farm economy was kind of in a downturn. So we went ahead and started offering training to a number of our county and district extension agents to also be able to provide these farm analyst services. So we now have a number of them across the state that have been through 3 years of training and can also provide this service. So they will be also at these workshops doing one-on-one consultation appointments as well. Now, I do want to mention we do have all of our expertise at these workshops, too. We will have Dwayne Hunn, the director of our Farm Analyst Program, and Kevin Herbal, who is the director of the Kansas Farm Management Association.
Both of which are extremely well-versed in this process.
Yes, so we have some very good expertise to tap into no matter which situation or what situation the farm family finds themselves in.
We'll repeat these locations and dates, but 2 days, 11th and 12th of January in Salina, the 23rd and 24th of January in Kingman, a single day in Colby, Wednesday, February the 7th then, later on Thursday, February the 8th in Dodge City, and the 12th and 13th of February in Emporia. And there is limited space for each of these, so it is a first-come, first-serve orientation here, Robin, right?
Yes, I have been getting a number of calls here lately. Most of our appointments will either go from 8 to noon or 1 to 5 o'clock. We do have limited appointments that go from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 in the afternoon with an hour break for lunch. Those are filling up fast. So, like I said, you need to either call me at my office to register, or you can register at our upcoming Farming for the Future conferences going around the state here pretty soon.
In fact, those have started already, with the first one taking place this week in Pratt, several others to come here in the weeks ahead. You can look into this opportunity at those locations. How might they contact you? What is the best way to do so then, Robin?
If you can't remember my contact information that I'll list here in a minute, you can always go to agmanager.info and click on the Farm Financial Workshops under the events page. But you can also contact me directly on my direct line, 785-532-0964, or you can shoot me an email at robinreed@ksu.edu, and I will give you a call from that email as well. One perk I'd like to mention on these farm financial workshops, we are working a lot with the Kansas Farm Management Association to put these on. So the registration fee will be $150 on these, which includes all of our time in preparing and having the analyst there at the workshop. But if you choose to join the Kansas Farm Management Association, we're going to apply $100 of that registration fee off of your first year membership to the association. So it's just our way of encouraging farmers to try that for a year and see if it works for them. One thing we've seen in a lot of our farm analyst work, by being a member of that and having those farm records organized and some of that performance analysis done, we can really build off of that to help project into the future and look at some changes in the operation that in the past our services really have provided thousands of dollars in savings as far as input costs. Just what we're looking at with cash flow into the coming year, that can make a huge difference. So.
Excellent. All of those details are listed, by the way, once again, on the agmanager.info website. But there are two key deadlines to keep in mind as well for the Salina and Kingman sessions in January. Registration due by the 21st of December. That is a week from tomorrow. And for the latter three in Colby, Dodge City, Emporia in February, the deadline for registering is January the 16th. Point being, Robin, don't put this off terribly long because, once again, those dates are going to come up quickly and there is limited space available.
So we ask registration quite a bit in advance just because when you register and secure your spot, we send out those financial worksheets that need to be filled out and turned in before your appointment. So I know when people get those, they're a little overwhelming. We're asking pretty much everything we can about your financial picture, because what we can do for you in one of these workshops is only as good as the financial information that we have specific to your operation. So I want to make sure by having the registration deadline that early that it gives each farm a few weeks at least to put together the financial information that we need to help them out.
Well, it's a great opportunity, once again, for farm families who would like a little assistance in planning for their future and working their way through the economic difficulties they may be encountering to get quality information and assistance in that direction through these workshops. Robin, we appreciate the word on these. The best of luck in conducting them here as we get into 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
She's Robin Reed, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. K-State putting on these farm financial workshops featuring the auspices of the Farm Analyst Program at 5 locations, coming up relatively soon. To repeat once more, the dates and locations, January 11th and 12th in Salina, January 23rd and 24th in Kingman, then Wednesday, February 7th in Colby, Thursday, February 8th in Dodge City, and lastly, February 12th and 13th in Emporia. Your local extension office has information on this as well, but go directly for immediate information to agmanager.info. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now we'll break away for a few moments. When we return, we'll have today's lead stories from the agricultural news page for you. And, of course, still ahead is our weekly feature from Gus Vanderhoeven, Stop, Look, and Listen. So please stay with us, won't you, here on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network, and welcome back to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Now today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue reiterated yesterday that President Trump will keep his support for the renewable fuel standard, but he said changes are needed to help the oil refinery industry deal with what's seen as speculation in the market for renewable fuel credits. Perdue was speaking about an array of topics yesterday during a presentation at the National Press Club. On biofuels policy, he said that the president had made a commitment to farm state supporters to protect the standard. While he was campaigning for the office, Perdue said the president reiterated that commitment to oil state senators who met with the president last week over the RIN numbers issue. Perdue said ethanol producers are not in the market for RIN prices, but rather for the renewable volume of ethanol production. The Trump administration is working this week with the EPA, Senator Ted Cruz, and others to resolve the RIN prices that some believe to be very speculative, cornering the market. And that has damaged refiners, in Perdue's words. He went on to say the president wants the refiners to flourish, and actually more refineries based on our new petroleum supplies and natural resources. But Perdue went on to say he also knows that the president is committed, and he has articulated to those 9 senators that he is committed to the Renewable Fuel Standard program. Looking at the Farm Bill, the secretary said the USDA is going to consult with the House and the Senate Agriculture Committees this coming year. Based on some perspectives, the USDA has heard from producers that information and broad principles will be shared with the committees, but the secretary said the USDA will not write a proposed farm bill. And he said he expects tweaks in the Farm Bill, including changes to help dairy and cotton producers, comparing the farm safety net to the safety net of a trapeze act in a circus. The secretary said the safety net shouldn't be too high nor too low. In his prepared remarks, the secretary said the importance of agricultural trade has been a repetitive theme that he's heard from farmers as he's traveled the country. Of course, many anxious about trade policy and the North American Free Trade Agreement talks. He pointed out that roughly 20% of farm income is tied to trade, topping $140 billion in fiscal 2017. He says that the president is very concerned about the trade deficit, and the secretary said, quoting, "I'm prone to remind him every time I'm in his presence that agriculture contributes to a trade surplus, and he needs to recognize that." Perdue said that he's optimistic about the future of NAFTA. He said that the president wants a trade deal that benefits the American people, including farmers. He said while there may be some anxiety along the way, he thinks the negotiating style is right in line with what can be expected to be a great NAFTA 2 that will benefit American farmers and producers. And Perdue said that recent agricultural export forecasts reflect the gains in market access for U.S. producers. More on that angle from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue took time during his visit at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Tuesday to highlight recent individual U.S. achievements related to ag trade. Some well-known.
We succeeded in getting U.S. beef back into China for the first time in 13 years. We opened China to American rice for the first time ever. We got U.S. pork back into Argentina for the first time since 1992.
And some that perhaps have not been as well publicized on a national level.
Japan expanded market access for U.S. chipping potatoes for the first time in 11 years. Vietnam notified the U.S. that it will resume imports of U.S. distillers' dried grain.
The secretary noted the part this increased market access played in making fiscal year 2017 the third highest ag export year on record, and his potential role in making FY18, if current forecasts hold up, the fourth highest ag export year on record. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Meantime, Senate Agriculture Committee Chairman, U.S. Senator Pat Roberts of Kansas, said yesterday in comments that trade is more than a product crossing a border. Addressing the Washington International Trade Association, Roberts said yesterday that U.S. agricultural exports have grown because of trade agreements like NAFTA. And he, along with his Kansas counterpart in the Senate, Jerry Moran, have been pressing the agricultural community to stress the importance of trade to the Trump administration. Roberts said that he spoke with the president over the weekend regarding NAFTA at the White House Christmas party, and he said that the president said we're going to be all right on NAFTA, in his words. However, many, including Goldman Sachs, believe that the U.S. will, in fact, withdraw from NAFTA before the talks are completed. Meantime, farmers need a backup plan if the U.S. exits NAFTA, according to a top Department of Agriculture official. Ted McKinney, the USDA Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, told agriculture.com that he would advise anybody to be prepared with contingencies, despite the administration knowing very well where the farm and agricultural industries stand, as he put it. The ongoing talks to renegotiate NAFTA aren't going as well as hoped, said McKinney, and he says abandoning the trade agreement still seems to be a real possibility. While McKinney says he and others within the USDA are optimistic that the administration will carry the day during the negotiations, he said it would be prudent for crop and livestock producers to look at some contingencies in the event the U.S. were to exit the 23-year-old trade agreement. In other headlines today, the USDA raised corn usage for ethanol yesterday for the 2017-18 crop by 50 million bushels, but also lowered soybean and wheat exports by 25 million bushels for each crop. The December World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates released yesterday few major changes in the numbers, though the ripple effects increased projected wheat and soybean stocks for the 17-18 crop by a comparable 25 million bushels, while lowering corn ending stocks by as much as 50 million bushels. The unchanged price for corn, as the projected farm gate price goes from the USDA, now at $3.20 per bushel. It did narrow the price range for corn, bumping up the minimum price to $2.85 per bushel. And on the soybean side, the cash price projection from the USDA now remains at $9.30 per bushel, though the USDA also narrowed the average price range for beans on both the high and the low end by 15 cents per bushel. And the USDA took a look at the wheat cash price as well, and it remains pegged at $4.60 per bushel. Much like corn and soybeans, the USDA narrowed the low and the high prices for wheat by about 10 cents per bushel on either end. Again, those were a few of the quick highlights from the USDA's World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report on grains, which was released yesterday. When we get together on Friday with K-State grain market economist Dan O'Brien, we will dive into those numbers and talk about their significance to the markets in the weeks ahead. That's a glance at today's agricultural news headlines for you. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now, one last break. When we return, our weekly visit from K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen. This is our state, Kansas.
It seems a guy called Victor Cedarstaff was riding his horse one day when his hat blew off.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
It's not really a bolo tie, but if you see me wear it, that is the intent. Even though it looks like it, I wear it as a necklace. Now don't worry, I have not turned into a hippie wearing a peace sign on my bare chest. I do have a few rather unique bolo ties though, but never or seldom do I wear the real thing. They run from American Indian art to pieces of stone. From Hawaii, I have nuts through which a cord is pulled. All very interesting, but somehow I don't feel the bolo tie belongs to me. It's like wooden shoes don't belong to a cowboy. However, I can feel very comfortable wearing the wooden shoes as I once hauled them in my suitcase back to Kansas all the way from the old country. I had bought them at the local co-op. That is the place to buy them, by the way, the real ones, no souvenirs. At Schiphol, the airport, you buy the tourist version. Of course, you can walk in those just as well. But that's not where I buy. The other place to buy them is at a quiet place where they are made. And you can see the whole process of how a block of sawn poplar or willow is transformed into a comfortable wooden shoe. But back to the bolo ties. It seems a guy called Victor Cederstaff was riding his horse one day when his hat blew off. Wary of losing the silver-trimmed headband, he slipped it around his neck. His companion joked, "That's a nice-looking tie you're wearing, Victor." That could have been the beginning of the bolo tie. The bolo tie is an artifact belonging to Western wear. They often have the tips of the neck thong in silver, held together in front by some ornament. The ornament is generally flat. You know what I'm talking about, because we're on the edge of the Western states. And I've seen you wear them, and it looks good. Much better than a regular tie. A brief description I came across reads, "A bolo tie is a type of necktie consisting of cord or braided leather with decorative metal tips secured with an ornamental clasp or slide. They're easy to make and can be quite original. The clasp has been called findings. I tried to be original with mine, but like I said, I don't wear a big hat nor a bandana, except when I want to act up. But the word findings I really like, and that is why my bolo tie or necklace is classified as being correct. Let me explain. You remember me telling you my horse Flash killed by lightning on the range a few years ago. Flash was a stallion, gelded later in life after it had given us a couple of interesting foals. The dam was Pop-Tart, my son's pony club pony. I was very fond of Flash. He had character, being 3/4 Arab. I regret I did not ride him as often as I would have liked to. The reason being we did not live on the farm. Had we lived there with stables and corrals, I would have ridden more. However, that fact did not lessen my joy in loving him. When I found him dead, it didn't take long for coyotes to clean up and scatter the bones. I kept throwing the bones on a heap as I checked the other horses and cows. One day, I noticed that the skull was pretty clean. It was now white bone. I picked it up, deciding to take it home, as I did with a few other bones, a shoulder blade and leg bones. The leg bones were heavy. No wonder he had looked square and strong when alive. Looking around, I saw the jawbone and carried it home as well. I now held Flash's head, which told him to go to me when I whistled. Oh, not always on a run, and surely not always the first one to come. No, that was Pop-Tart or Thunder, the foal. Once Flash stood next to me, though, he would take the grain and enjoy it. I would look into his eyes, and he would look at me. He was proud and willing. I loved him. At home, I took the skull out of the cap, and while I did that, a front tooth fell out onto the gravel behind the truck. My eyes followed the falling tooth. Not wanting to lose more loose teeth, I diverted my eyes and lost the fallen tooth. I immediately set the head down and looked for the tooth. No way. I could not find it. I really looked. For years, Flash's head has now stood in front of my truck's parking spot with the one front tooth missing. But lo and behold, a few weeks ago, after parking the truck and walking behind it, I see the tooth among the gravel. It now has been years that I lost it. It lay there clearly to see. I carefully, reverently picked it up and felt elated. It fits the open hole. Of course it does. But I had to try anyway. I took it inside and cleaned it. It's whole, uncracked, but an old tooth, worn tooth, 2 inches long from root to tip. It was the flat tip which nipped the grass and took the grain. I felt rich holding it, having found it after all these years. Of course, I could have placed it back into the skull where it belongs, but I did not. I drilled a hole into the narrow end, the root end, and I pulled a leather lace through it. I tied a knot in the lace, and now I can wear it. As a matter of fact, I'm wearing it now. To heck with what Eric thinks. It looks very good on a dark sweater.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas. That's our time for today. Thanks, as always, for listening in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.